I grew up in the countryside in rural Minnesota, and when I was in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, basketball was my thing. It was my way to get away from home, and it was something to do after school during those long winter evenings. One weekend, it was time for the tournament, and because of my family situation, the only way for me to get to the tournament was to walk 3 miles to my neighbor's house to get a ride. And so that's what I did. It was 0 degrees. Anyone who's seen the movie Fargo can imagine what that country road was like in the dead of winter at 0 degrees. By the time I arrived, my scarf was completely covered in ice. My hat was completely covered in ice. My eyelashes had ice on them, and I was extremely cold. It was actually really dangerous for me to do that. And I still sometimes go back and visit that walk. I can remember the entire walk. I was pretty scared, actually, because I knew that if I fell, that would be the end of me, literally, because there were no cars coming. There would be no one to help me. So I walked up to my neighbor's door, rang the doorbell. They let me in, and I stood there in the coat area in the mudroom, pretty awkwardly, and waited. I peeked inside and I could see that the kids were all sitting at the dining table drinking hot cocoa. Now in Minnesota, especially during that time, it's pretty much customary to, if anyone walks in the door, you immediately feed them food. You immediately serve them a little lunch, which consisted of sandwiches, coffee, bars, things that you just always kept around the house in case you had company. But I wasn't offered anything. I just stood there. And I felt scared and humiliated and very confused. So I waited until they finished their hot cocoa, and then they were all bundled up warm and nice. And then we got into the car and drove to the tournament. When we stepped out onto that basketball court, we were all in the same court, wearing the same uniform. My neighbor and I, we even lived on the same street. But we had arrived at that basketball court under very different circumstances. I was already exhausted. I'd already been humiliated and treated like I didn't matter, not even as a neighbor. But there we were. Years later, I called that neighbor when I had become an adult and was so haunted by that experience. I wanted to ask her, why did you let me stand in the mudroom when I was so cold, covered with ice? Why didn't you offer me a cup of hot cocoa? I was a kid. Her answer was, I didn't know. I didn't know you had walked. I didn't know that you had walked all the way from your house to my house. And you know what? I didn't believe her. I thought, how could you not know? In the countryside, you can hear a car coming from a mile away. You certainly can hear a car drive up into your driveway. You hear the car doors open and close. It's quiet, especially in the wintertime. How could you have not realized that there were no car sounds? I didn't believe her. May have been true, but to me it seemed like total ignorance. It confirmed my suspicion that I really didn't matter. My safety didn't matter. I didn't matter. I've taken that memory through my life. And I always always consider that the person in front of me may have had a journey that I don't know about. They may have come 10 miles walking. They may have arrived by chauffeur. You just don't know what journey people have taken. And that's why it's important to treat every single person like they deserve to be there. It instilled in me this belief in the possibility of others. With these events happening in Minneapolis, one message has become clear to all of us. There's something that we didn't know. I didn't know that moms sit down their sons, their big, healthy, joyous sons, their 6 foot tall, big burly sons, and tell them they need to be afraid of me. These marches and riots that are happening around the country are that phone call that I made to my neighbor. Why didn't you help me? Why didn't you recognize the dangerous journey that I had taken just to get to your house? How could you not know? We live in the same streets. We walk on the same sidewalks. Our kids go to the same schools. How could you not know? My children are brown. They're beautiful brown children. Their first interaction with the police was when they were toddlers being driven by their dad to preschool Minneapolis. And we'd forgotten to switch out the tabs on the car. So at 7:30 in the morning, as they're driving to preschool, the car got pulled over. I wasn't with them, just their brown dad, his brown children. And the police officer made them get out of the car. And again, it was winter, but it was colder this time than that 3-mile walk that I took. It was 15 below zero. They made him get out of the car, take my little brown babies out of the car, out of their car seats, and stand there by the car. They gave their dad a ticket and said, "Don't get back in the car, or you'll get arrested, and your kids will be taken away." They weren't close to a gas station. They weren't close to a cafe. It was 15 degrees below zero. So there were my 2 brown babies and my brown husband standing on the side of the road, blocks and blocks from any help. 15 degrees below zero. I know without a doubt that if it had been a white dad driving his little white babies to preschool, they would not have been left on the side of the road at 15 degrees below zero in a Minnesota winter. The inhumanity of that act infuriated me. But there was nothing to be done. There's no recourse. When I hear the phrase Black Lives Matter, I feel grief. I feel anger. I feel like saying something else. I feel like saying, Black happiness matters. What kind of a society do we have if people have to march and riot to try to get us to understand that they don't want to die, that they want to live? We are oppressors, we are occupiers, and we are allowing ourselves to overlook what is so obvious. These riots, these marches, are that phone call that I made to my neighbor. They're wanting to know, they're demanding to know, why didn't you help us? Why didn't you see what was right in front of your eyes? Why didn't you hear? There was a quick news article about a young Southwest attendant who happened to sit by a CEO of another airline. And she said something in the interview. I couldn't find her name, or I would give her name. She said, focus on your part of the solution. So what is your part of the solution? What is my part of the solution? Here are some things that you can do, that I can do. When you are encountering anyone, remember that their path to that moment may be very different from yours. They may have worked 10 times as hard to get to that point. They may have walked 3 miles to get to that point. They may have walked 20 miles to get to that point. It's entirely possible. If you're out and about and you see my children, one of my kids, being hovered over by someone in an aisle at a store, walk up, start a conversation, be there. If you see one of my kids in a gallery, an art gallery, looking at artwork like we've done so many times, and the security guard is hovering, walk up and start talking to the security guard. Distract them. We need to take action. We can't just continue to not hear, not see, and not speak. We need to take action. Please take care of my brown babies when they're out there, when they're big, when they're all grown up. And like George's mom, when I'm no longer here to comfort them, please take care of them. I'm counting on you, every one of you.